morning. My name is Courtney Felton. I am the education curator for the North Carolina Maritime Museum, and I am very excited to talk to you about one of my all-time favorite groups of animals, sharks. And it is especially relevant because Shark Week is being celebrated for the next couple weeks in July. So I'm really excited to talk to you about these amazing animals and a little bit about the history of the shark fishery in this area, as well as some shark conservation. So this is kind of the overview of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to give you a good kind of Sharks 101, talk about the sharks that we see in North Carolina, talk about some of their really cool adaptations, go into the fishery, and then talk about conservation. So to start, how many people have seen Jaws? Yeah, most people. Most people have seen Jaws, right? And so if I read the quote, "It lives to kill, a mindless eating machine. It will attack and devour anything. It is as if God created the devil and gave it Jaws." Gives us a very distinct picture of what sharks are. So my goal here is kind of to dispel that view of sharks. So this quote, I think, is a little bit better. Sharks have been living for over 400 million years. This means that they were on Earth before trees were on Earth. They came through the great mass extinctions and competed favorably with the rapidly evolving bony fishes, and today they are among the top predators of the sea. During that time, sharks have been honed to evolutionary perfection with a body that yacht designers can only envy, with wide-ranging sensory systems that military technologists would die for. This was an introduction to the Encyclopedia of Sharks, a phenomenal book if you want to learn everything you possibly can about sharks. So for me, why sharks? There is so much diversity within this group of animals. There are over 500 species. They are still being discovered today. They range in size from the dwarf lantern shark that's 6 to 7 inches long, to our lovely whale shark that can be as long as a school bus, thinking like 50 to 60 feet. That is a big range. With that big range, 75% of sharks never get larger than about 4 feet. So this image we have of these really large animals in the ocean, it's not quite accurate. We do have those big friends out there, but a lot of them are small. And our biggest sharks, our whale sharks and our basking sharks, are filter feeders. They're going after plankton. They're also found in a large diversity of habitats. A lot of times people think about them in the ocean, but they're also in the sounds of our area. They can be in our estuaries. And then there are freshwater sharks. So locally, we have the bull shark that will go up into the rivers. But in other parts of the world, there are fully freshwater sharks that live their entire life in freshwater. Now, there's also just a natural fascination with sharks. Sharks is a topic that tends to get people really excited. I do a lot of programs with younger kiddos who can tell me a million different types of sharks. They can tell me every shark fact. We are just naturally interested in them. And part of that is also thanks to movies like Jaws, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year, as well as more recently, we had the Meg that showed up. We have the very, very accurate Sharknado series. And then we also have TV, right? We have Shark Week shedding an eye on these animals. And then finally, they have some cool adaptations. I'm going to talk about their body in a second, but I want to kind of focus on a couple here. The first one is bioluminescence. This is me in 2016 holding a species of shark that was just named as a new species in 2015. It was just a year old. I was very excited. It is called a pocket shark, and it did not get its name because it fits in your pocket. It got its name because behind its pectoral fins or side fins, they have these little pockets that secrete bioluminescent goo in the deep ocean, which they think they might use as a way to escape predators. Pretty cool. There are also sharks that are biofluorescent. Now, if you're thinking luminescent, fluorescent, what's the difference? It took me a long time to learn, totally understand. Basically, the short version is biofluorescence means these sharks take in light and then through a chemical reaction, re-emit it as green light. So it changes that color. Cat sharks or chain dogfish sharks, a pretty popular aquarium touch pool shark are able to do this. They live most of their life down deep, and they have these unique patterns that allow them to find mates and find each other. And then lastly, they can live a long time. Great white sharks are estimated to live about 70 years. The Greenland shark puts that all to shame, living 200 to 400 years. That means that some of the Greenland sharks that are around today were around during the American Revolution. Kind of crazy to think about. So very, very cool animals. Now, if I asked you to draw me a shark, you would probably give me something that looks relatively similar to this. We would be focusing on these big, nice dorsal fins, the iconic thing you think of when you think of a shark. That big dorsal fin on top is going to help them a lot with balance while they're in the water. It is paired with these pelvic and anal fins that, again, help keep them upright. They're also going to have those pectoral fins or side fins, helping them with movement and turning, and then this nice caudal fin. So that caudal fin or tail fin is going to be made up of two lobes that are generally of different sizes. The upper lobe tends to be a little bit bigger than the lower lobe. This can be not so dramatic, like in a tiger shark where they're about the same size, to really dramatic if you think of like a thresher shark that's swimming through the ocean and uses that tail to stun prey and whip it around. Very cool animals. Additionally, they have really cool senses. So if we look at this head area, we can talk about their nose. So it is often said that sharks are basically swimming noses, or they can detect a drop of blood in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Not the most accurate. They do have a pretty good sense of smell, but they can also sense other chemicals in the water due to a few other adaptations. So along with their nose, they have something called a lateral line along their side that has the ability to have little chemoreceptors or chemical receptors along it to detect other things in the water and to detect movement. So they can tell if something is like thrashing around and having a hard time. They also are going to have their gills. Unlike a bony fish, they don't have a covering for their gills. You're going to be able to see those 5 to 7 gill slits. And some sharks have something called a spiracle. Have you guys ever heard that a shark has to constantly swim in order to survive? Anyone heard that? Yes, some nods, perfect. Not true for all sharks. There are many sharks that have this little spiracle, this opening behind the eye that pumps water over their gills so they can sit stationary. Again, if you ever go to an aquarium, Pinal Shoals Aquarium is a good example of this. They have nurse sharks in their tank, and the nurse sharks tend to just sit on the bottom. And the reason they can do that is because that spiracle is pumping that water. Now, additionally, they have really cool scales. Sharks have such cool scales. They are called dermal denticles. So if you think about going to the dermatologist, they're checking your skin. If you think about going to the dentist, they're checking your teeth. So they have tooth skin, which means if you rub them one way, it's relatively smooth. If you rub them the other way, it's going to be a little bit rougher. And you get kind of those points of the teeth. And in fact, shark skin was used as sandpaper for a long time because of that rough texture. So we have this. If we zoom in on their head, look at this cute little shark. We have a good view of their eyes. Sharks sometimes get a rap for not having great vision. Again, with 500 plus species, there's a lot of diversity of vision in there, but they generally have better vision at low light. So they have a lot of rods in their eyes. They can see at low light. They also have something called a tapetum lucidum behind their eye. That is, if you've ever shown a light on a cat eye and you see that reflective circle coming back, same thing with these guys. It allows them to see in low light levels. They also have their eyes on the side of the head, giving them almost a 360-degree view around them. It does mean that they don't have great depth perception because their eyes don't overlap quite so well. So different species, like a great white, might use their eyes when they're below, see a seal, and then use those other senses as they're coming up to grab it. Now, they do also have these ampullae of Lorenzini, all of these little jelly-filled pores around their body. And these allow them to sense electric currents in the water and heartbeats in the water. This is especially important for animals like the hammerhead that have that long, elongated head and all of those ampullae along there. Now, they can sense heartbeat within a couple of inches, which is important if they're eating things that are buried underneath the sand or that are trying to hide. Also good in murky waters. And if you think about it, if you guys stick your arm out and you twist it like this, you're sending out little electric currents. And so they would be able to sense that in the water. So pretty cool animals. The second most important thing, or the thing we talk about the most, are their teeth or their dentition. So I have a lovely shark jaw that I will pass around. And by pass around, I mean give to someone and then they can pass it to the next person. Different shark species are going to have different types of teeth for different purposes. In this shark jaw, you can see these teeth on the top are going to be serrated like a knife, and so they're really good at cutting. I often joke with kids that they don't have hands, so they can't use a fork and knife to eat their meal, so they have a built-in fork and knife in their mouth. Now on the bottom, we have these kind of grasping teeth that are going to allow them to hold on to that food. Additionally, they have taste buds, but their taste buds are located in their jaw. So they aren't able to stick their tongue out and lick to see if something is food, like a dog or a cat, but they do have to take kind of a taste bite or a test bite to see if something is food. And rows of teeth. If you look at that jaw, you're going to see it has somewhere between 5 to 7 rows of teeth. They are a conveyor belt of teeth, constantly losing teeth and getting new ones. The replacement rate varies with species. It can be as short as 8 days or as long as a few months. So a pretty broad spectrum there. And you can identify sharks by their teeth or their dentition. In the back, I have shark teeth if anyone wants to take shark teeth home. And then I do also have a little Sharks of the Mid-Atlantic handout that has the tooth next to the shark, so you can try to identify your teeth. So I've talked about the outside. The other cool thing I want to talk about with sharks is shark reproduction, and I'm going to talk about it really briefly. Sharks have been around a long time, and because of that, they have evolved multiple ways of having babies. Some sharks are viviparous, which means they give live birth. They're going to have a placenta inside their uterus and have little babies. This is going to be true for bull sharks, hammerheads, lemon sharks, makos. Some sharks are ovoviviparous, which means they lay eggs inside, they have eggs inside their uterus, the eggs hatch, and then you have the babies inside the uterus, and then they give live birth. It's a weird combination. This is true for great white sharks. This is true for sand tiger sharks. And then some species of sharks, like the sand tiger, take it a step further. And the first baby, the first pup that is hatched inside mom tends to eat its other uterus mates to give it a little bit extra growth. They call it intrauterine cannibalism. Very weird. They're sharks, guys. And then our last group here are oviparous, which means they lay eggs. Usually these are going to be kind of those mermaid purses that you think of. That's what these animals do. These are mostly our smaller sharks, like our cat sharks and our zebra sharks. And then to make everything even more crazy, there is some evidence that sharks can make clones of themselves in a process called parthenogenesis. This has only really ever been documented in an aquarium setting where there's been a female who has never been exposed to a male and is able to have a successful baby. This is really hard to prove, honestly, because they can hold sperm for a long time, so it can be tricky to prove, but there is some evidence that they might be able to make little clones of themselves. And sometimes I feel like if I had little clone Courtneys running around, once they were adults, it would be really helpful, because then I could put them to work. So now we have an overview of sharks in general. Let's talk about North Carolina sharks. There have been 50 plus, some say 73, documented species in North Carolina. 28 of them are what we would call common. They're seen pretty regularly. The majority of these sharks are less than 3 feet long. And the most common shark in North Carolina is going to vary by location and season. So what's common in the sounds is not necessarily going to be what's as common on the ocean side. And then what's common in winter might not be the same as summer. So these two right here are the most common according to the UNC study that has been going on for a long time. We have the Atlantic sharp-nosed shark right here. They get to be about 3 to 4 feet long. They are believed to pup in North Carolina, to have their babies in North Carolina. And then we have the black-nosed shark as well. They get to be maybe 4 to 5-ish feet. They're a little bit larger. They are known for having that little black nose. And they are going to be both in the estuaries as well as on the ocean side. Some other notables are the bull shark. We do have bull sharks here. Until 2011, we had no evidence of them, or very minimal evidence of them having pups or babies in our waters. Since 2011, though, they have been pupping in the Pamlico Sound. So we are seeing more of them there. They are special because they can go up into fresh water. So my neighbors on the Trent River up by Newbern actually saw a bull shark not too long ago. We also have great whites. These are going to be oceanic. They are off our coast. They are not coming too close. Our great white gets to be about 21 feet in length, and we're made famous for jaws. We also see sand tigers. If any of you are a diver, if you go diving on any of our rec sites, you're likely to see sand tiger sharks. They are a critically endangered shark species. They are known for having spots along their side. They also have a really toothy grin. So their teeth are kind of falling out of their mouth. It makes them look really scary, but they're actually a pretty docile shark. They do really well in human care. Again, pretty common in the aquarium setting. And they get to be about 12-ish feet. We have the bonnethead shark. Sorry for my friends right there. My bonnethead shark is a small hammerhead species. They also pup in South and North Carolina, in the Carolinas. They are the only omnivorous shark species that we know of. So, sharks are carnivorous. We think about sharks, they're eating fish, they're eating seals if you're a great white. They are eating potentially a dolphin or a turtle. These guys like to eat crabs, they like to eat clams, they like to eat scallops, kind of crunchy things. And as they're scooching along the ocean floor, or the estuary floor, they noticed in the stomach contents that there was grass. And so they originally thought, oh, well, you know, if you've ever tried to like pick lettuce off of something and you weren't able to get all of the vegetable off and you had to eat it, they were thinking that maybe that's what was happening. But it turns out they're able to digest the green stuff. They're able to digest plants, which means they're getting nutrients from the plant, which makes them different than a carnivore. So super cool. Bonnetheads, omnivorous, again, 3 to 4 feet. And then our most common winter shark are the dogfish, either a smooth dogfish or a spiny dogfish. They come in the autumn and then they leave in the spring. Again, there is some evidence that the smooth dogfish is pupping in our North Carolina estuaries. So these are North Carolina sharks. Okay, you are now experts. Good job. So let us talk about the fishery. To talk about the shark fishery, I'm going to go back into the 1920s in the 1910s actually, with the Ocean Leather Company. Now you're going to have to forgive me on this because I have a really hard time with this name, but the Ocean Leather Company was founded in 1917 by Einhenrich and the Bendixson brothers. They were from Europe. The Bendixson brothers had a patent to remove the scales or the dermal denticles from shark skin, and they wanted the leather because leather was in high demand, especially with the world wars happening. So he comes to America and sets up a tannery in New York, or in New Jersey. But the problem is that patent isn't doing a good job of removing these dermal denticles. They called it shagreen, and you can't really make a pliable leather with that on there. So in comes two American chemists, Theodore Kohler and Alan Rogers, who are able to design 2 different processes using hydrochloric acid to remove that denticle and create a really soft, pliable leather that was popular for boots, for bags, for belts, for wallets, kind of anything you needed leather. And this leather was stronger than cow leather. So it's 33% stronger than cow leather. So pretty good product. And we had a good number of sharks around. So this is happening in Newark, New Jersey, but down in North Carolina, we have Russell Coles. So Russell Coles is originally from Danville, Virginia. He was a farmer up there, but he came down to North Carolina to go fishing every summer. And he has done a lot of fishing. He was one of the only fishermen to know how to catch sharks along the East Coast. He was also friends with this man right here, President Theodore Roosevelt. And so with this in mind, Heinrich meets Coles and goes, ooh, well, Teddy Roosevelt could really add some like power behind our brand if we got him a picture of him wearing that shark leather boots. Might look really good for us. So they do meet. Russell and Heinrich meet in New York in 1918, and he becomes a partner in this. And so in his role as a partner, he is determined to set up operations off of Cape Lookout. So he gets involved with a local captain, Charlie Willis, who he was already working with for all of his fishing endeavors in general. And they get busy getting sharks. They also begin hiring crews and establishing process facilities in Morehead City. So there was one on Bogue Sound that focused mainly on porpoises, which are really dolphin, and rays, and then one at Camp Glen in Morehead City that was focused on sharks. And he says, in May, June, and July of 1918 at Cape Lookout, North Carolina, I handled large numbers of sharks of many kinds for leather, food, oil, and fertilizer. Having established a shark fishing station at that point, now controlled by Ocean Leather Company of New York, with which I am associated. The work was so intensive that it was impossible to make the scientific study of the material that I would have wished. I do appreciate that he wanted the science part of it. And to be fair, he did get at least 2 scientific articles out of this. One of them is on the large sharks of Cape Lookout, North Carolina, and then one was about shark diet and habits. So how are they fishing for them? They were basically using a very large gill net. It spanned, let me see, 360 yards long, and it was about 12 feet deep, and it had an 8-inch mesh. There were weights along the bottom. They would put it out from boats that were manned by 3 to 4 men, depending on who you ask and what source you read. And they would let it sit and then collect the sharks in the net. Now, they did also try hand fishing for them. They also tried dynamite fishing. Was not very successful, and they did, in fact, explode one of their boats while attempting it. So that was short-lived. But here is one of their sharks that they caught that was going to be processed. So they would use the shark skin. So they would skin the shark, and then they would take that skin by rail line up to Newark, where it would undergo the tanning process to remove the shagreen or the dermal denticles and be made into what other leather products. They also took the livers to collect oil, shark oil. It has a good amount of omega-3s in there, so it was used for a lot of different things. And then they would take the fins, dry them, and send them off. The carcasses themselves, the rest of the body, was tossed to the side of the pier. And there are stories of the fishermen's wives coming down because all of the blue crabs came to eat all of the shark carcasses, and they would collect all the blue crabs. And at that time, they didn't eat blue crabs, but they did use them as fertilizer for their gardens. So they would come, collect the blue crabs, and then go fertilize their gardens. The plant itself was short-lived in North Carolina, 1918 to 1923, and they shifted their efforts down to Florida and to Cuba, where they were having larger catches more consistently. So it didn't end there, though. This fishery endeavor ended up inspiring Cecil Nelson, who was in Morehead City in the 1930s. And he started a shark fishery from 1930 to like 1941-ish, and was doing the same thing, skinning the sharks, sending that shark skin up to New York, and then selling the rest of the shark and disposing of the rest of the body. He only did this for a few years and then stopped, but then after that, he became very famous because he went to Saudi Arabia to teach them how to hunt sharks. He went to Africa to teach them how to hunt sharks. So he still had quite a legacy. And then after the 1940s, it's relatively quiet until we get to the 1980s, where we end up having another potentially 9 vessels going out and doing a commercial shark fishery. In this picture, there's a great white shark. If you've ever been to the Maritime Museum in Beaufort, we have a replica of the head of that shark in our building. It was caught on a shark fishing expedition that was run by Lloyd Davidson of Moorhead, and he was reestablishing that commercial longline fishing for sharks in August of 1983. It only ran until 1985 because there started to be more regulations on the sharks. Each shark was caught by line, brought in, and then the shark was bled, the fins were removed for shipment to the Orient, the head was removed, the fish was gutted and cut into pieces. And then the meat wasn't super popular, but it was somewhat popular. So they were taking the meat from that shark and then selling that as well. But to talk about our great white shark, it was caught September of 1984 by John Dodrell about 50 miles south of Beaufort Inlet in 170 feet of water aboard the Alligator, which was a 41-foot shearwater marine vessel, captained by Lloyd Davidson and Travis Creedle. And it was that part of that commercial shark fishery. So they went out for 3 to 5 days. They had like 20-ish hour-long days. I do not want to be a commercial fisherman. This continued to stick in my brain that I would not do well as a commercial fisherman. 20 hours is a long day. They would set mile-long lines with 120 hooks, and they would sit overnight and then bring them back in. And they caught a lot of different sharks. They caught sand tigers, sandbars, tiger sharks, great white sharks. Sometimes a shark would get caught on the line, and then a bigger shark would come in and eat the shark that was on the line. Sometimes sharks got tangled in the line. And that is what happened with our great white. So here's a picture of our great white. He was 15.5 feet long and weighed about 2,080 pounds. And that is not a full-grown adult white shark. That is kind of a older teenager, sub-adult white shark. But I do have these 2 quotes that came from an article written by John Dodrell for the Maritime History Museum. And so he said, protruding from the waters and wrapped in the cable mainline was a symmetrical caudal fin nearly 4 feet across. For a moment, I thought we had entangled a small whale. Then I looked further into the clear azure water and saw a monstrous white belly and a gill-slit head. So they bring this colossal animal up onto the boat, and then they get to the Moorhead City Port Terminal the next morning. The largest shark ever landed in the Carolinas weighed in at 2,080 pounds. On the way back to Captain Otis's with the shark, we made a scheduled stop at the local elementary school. And there are many locals who remember this. I am told about this quite often. This shark actually ended up going on a tour of state fairs until it started smelling too bad, and then they stopped doing that. But it is really kind of an interesting story. The shark in the museum, the teeth, that front row of teeth, are the real teeth from the white shark. And one time it bit me. So sharks and the shark fishery is something that was happening for a long time in this area. This is from NOAA. This is NOAA data. We see this kind of increase in shark fisheries starting in the 80s, going into the 90s, and then we see a pretty precipitous decline moving into the 2000s. This is due to federal regulations. There was such a big increase in fishing, and these sharks are long-lived. They tend to not have that many babies, so it's pretty easy to overfish them. So we see this decline, and then another pickup for a little bit, and then sort of a decline again. But this is the overall kind of trend we see. North Carolina, from 1982 to 1996, was the 2nd largest producer of sharks for the country. Second in the amount of dogfish that were caught, which is separate than the other shark fishery, and then second in the larger sharks too. So pretty cool. How they were doing this, traditionally it was long lines, like I mentioned with the great white shark. They have this line goes down with all of these baited hooks, and you wait for the sharks to come up and attach. They could also use gill nets, which is what we saw with the Ocean Leather Company and how they collected sharks. And then there are some that would do what we call strike netting, where there would be a plane and they would look out for a school of sharks, which is called a shiver, in case anyone is curious, shiver of sharks. And then they would radio to the boat would come out and deploy the net around the sharks and bring them in. So a few different methods for how they were doing this. Now, along with commercial fishing, we also have recreational fishing. And now you get to see my nephews who are very excited about catching a bonnethead shark. The American Fisheries, the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission has this quote about recreational shark fishing, which says, "Once called the poor man's marlin, recreational shark fishing is now a popular sport at all social and economic levels, largely due to accessibility to the resource." Starting pretty much with Jaws and moving forward, recreational shark fishing became much more popular. You ended up having shark jubilees and shark fishing tournaments to go after these animals. And so again, if we look at the NOAA data, we can see that same big increase in catches in the 1980s, kind of post-Jaws. And then again, we see a pretty precipitous decline due to regulations put on recreational fishermen. And we did have a shark fishing tournament in North Carolina, and I know that this graph is busy, and I apologize. This is the Poor Boy Shark Fishing Tournament, which was in at Shallotte Point. And this ran from 1982 to 1996. It was a 3-day long tournament, generally in July and August. And they would go out and they would catch as many sharks as they could. In general, they caught 4 to 9 species of sharks. Pretty consistently, sharp nose and black nose and black tip were kind of the big friends that they caught. And then the red line here is showing how many vessels were out there. So we have some big years where we have maybe like 22 vessels out there, and then it starts to decline near the end. So you can kind of see that catch, and that really relates pretty well to this. There's a nice overlay of those two activities. So, shark conservation. We've talked about shark fishing, shark conservation. Well, what has happened with sharks? A big one is fear. Prior to the 20th century, prior to the 20th century, we weren't spending a lot of time swimming in the water. It wasn't pretty common. We didn't know a lot that sharks were out there. It just wasn't necessarily an inherent fear. Starting in the 1960s and moving forward, we started to see a little bit more media attention on sharks. So shark bites were reported a little bit more. And then you also have the novel Jaws and then the movie Jaws coming out. And both Steven Spielberg and Peter Benchley, who wrote the novel, later went on in interviews to say, well, we feel a little bit bad about what happened to sharks post Jaws. They did a phenomenal job, though. That movie, the score, we were listening to it earlier, it just takes 2 notes to denote that villain, and you don't see it for the majority of the film, which just builds up your fear. So Steven Spielberg says, that's one of the things I still fear, not to get eaten by a shark, but that sharks are somehow mad at me for the feeding frenzy of crazy sport fishermen that happened after 1976. Good news, sharks don't hold grudges as far as I can tell, so I think he's okay. And then Peter Benchley says, sharks don't target human beings, and they certainly don't hold grudges. There's no such thing as a rogue man-eater shark with a taste for human flesh. So, the real plight to sharks is overfishing. There is an estimate that 100 million sharks are killed by humans each year. 30% of species are considered threatened or more. And in North Carolina, these numbers for some of our species are really dramatic. So in 2007, they did a study. They found 87% decline for sandbar sharks, 93% for blacktips, up to 97% for tiger sharks, 98% for scalloped hammerheads, and 99% or more for bull, dusky, and smooth hammerhead sharks. That is a big decline from 1970 to 2007. Additionally, they are also being faced with loss of habitat and habitat degradation. So when you think about these oceanic animals, they're out in the middle of the ocean, cruising around, but their pups have to be in a safe space. And so we have these nursery habitats of mangroves and estuaries and salt marshes. And to lose these habitats means we're losing the safe space for these small sharks to grow up to be big. This picture, I know you can't see it. It's not a very good photo. I did take it though, so I put it in here. This is a mangrove, and then there's a little oceanic white-tip shark pup that's hanging out in the water there. Additionally, we have pollution. We are seeing a lot of sharks getting entangled. We are also seeing sharks ingest pollution. Tiger sharks eat everything. But even in 1984, when they caught the great white, they also caught a tiger shark then, and they found a Ziploc bag in the tiger shark in 1984. So it's an issue that's been around for a long time. We're also seeing some of our filter feeding sharks, our basking sharks, and our whale sharks that have been ingesting microplastics while they're going out after their other food. There hasn't been a lot of study on what the impact of that is, but it is something to keep in mind. Because these animals are really important. They are the apex predators out there. They are keeping their ecosystem balanced. I'm going to put both of these up together because they really overlap quite a lot. These apex predators are keeping those mid-tier members of our food chain in check, which allows for a healthy and thriving ecosystem. Removing these top predators can cause those mid-levels to go kind of crazy, and then you end up with those lower levels being decimated. There was a study in the Outer Banks that looked at the removal of those large sharks from our estuaries and saw that there were more cow-nose rays in the water. And those cow-nose rays are little suction feeders. They like to eat clams and mussels and scallops. And so there was a decline in scallops, which they associated with the rise of cow-nose rays. It's a little bit fishy, pardon my pun of a study, but there is some evidence for that. They also change behavior by fear. So if you have ever been walking somewhere and you're like, oh, I need to go over there, but there's a dark alley in between where you are and that location, you're probably more likely to walk around that space than go through that dark alley. There is evidence that sharks being in an ecosystem change their prey's behavior. So when sharks are present by seagrass meadows, sea turtles are more likely to move along to another area and not spend all of their time grazing on one spot, which allows that seagrass meadow to grow and continue to be a healthy ecosystem for animals. So there's a lot, they call it fear ecology. If anyone is interested in studying it, there's so much that we don't know, and I would love for someone to come and tell me everything. I'm so interested in it. They also are targeting generally slower diseased fish. There is evidence that over time, because they are targeting these slower fish, these older fish, or these diseased fish, that it can actually help improve the genetics of fish populations, which leads to a healthier ecosystem. They also help coastal economies. My family went out to go shark fishing, to go recreational shark fishing, bringing that money in to our local economy. If you go diving on the reef or on the wrecks to look for sharks, helping our local economy. So having these healthy populations can bring in money to these areas. And then the last one, sharks and humans, focused mainly here on disease. So there is a product called Sharklet that is making a microscopic mimic of that dermal denticle pattern. If you've seen sharks, they don't tend to have barnacles or anything else growing on them, unlike dolphins or whales or turtles, poor turtles. So they were able to make a microscopic version of this pattern, and they found that bacteria and viruses wouldn't attach to it. And so their plan is to scale this up to put on any surface that has a lot of touching. So if you imagine it in a hospital, if they were able to put this lining on bedding, on door handles, on elevator buttons, all of those things that would limit the spread of diseases in hospitals. Could also be used on cell phones, on other things. There's a broader use for this. They've also tried to mimic this pattern on anti-fouling paint. If you've ever had to clean off the bottom of a boat, you appreciate anti-fouling paint and the work that it does. In 2012 to 2016, Speedo was inspired by sharks to make a faster swimsuit, trying to match that hydrodynamic ability of their scales. And then this final version, here's my nurse shark. I talked about them earlier, just sitting on the bottom. I gave them a little nurse cap. So this science is above my head, and so I'm going to do the very best I can to describe it. There is a scientist from Wisconsin who is studying sharks and studying their immune system. And he found a part of their immune system that can be trained to target different cells. So they are doing work to train this immune cell to potentially go after like prostate cancer or breast cancer cells and have benefits to humans. It's really cool. There are also parts of sharks that are occasionally used in vaccines as well. So kind of interesting, but there is a lot of research being done to look into these. So what is being done and what can we do? The first and biggest one is fishing regulations. I know this is a laundry list. You don't really have to worry about it. We have both federal laws protecting these sharks, and then we also have North Carolina rules. So federally, the Magnuson-Stevens Act gives NOAA Fisheries the ability to manage this species, or this complex of species, as a fishery to get understanding of how many are out there, what are they doing, can we fish them, can we not? The Shark Finning Prohibition Act of 2000 said you cannot fin a shark and put it back in the water. It's basically the takeaway from this. You have to, if you catch a shark and you are bringing it in, you have to bring the entire shark in with you to land. The Shark Conservation Act of 2010 just kind of reiterated that. And then we have had multiple recreational minimum size changes over time. 2020 was just the last one that I found. And then the Shark Fin Sales Elimination Act of 2023 said, you can't even sell the fins. No more bringing it to land, processing the fins, selling them. You cannot sell them. We are not going to be part of this anymore. In North Carolina, in 1990, we had a rule to control finning. So that was even before the federal law. Good job, North Carolina. In 1997, we were focused on specific species, the sandbar and dusky sharks, to reduce their bycatch and their directed catch. And then, depending on where you are, if you go to the pier in Emerald Isle, whose name I can never remember, Bogue Pier, great. They do not allow shark fishing on the pier at any time. So this is more so for swimmers than for the sharks, but it does benefit the sharks too. NOAA put together this handy infographic. If you are going to go out there and fish for sharks, you are allowed to. There are certain sharks that you are allowed to catch. They ask that you have proper permits to go out there. You follow the bag and size limits that they set so that we're keeping them out there for the future. To use circle hooks and specific gear to limit the amount of bycatch. A big thing with sharks are not so much them actively being fished, but them being caught in other fisheries as bycatch. So a non-targeted species. So using a circle hook and other gear, keep their fins attached, figure out what species you have, and then report the catch. Now you might be asking, Courtney, how am I possibly supposed to know what shark species I have? I just know it's a shark. Totally valid. They created handy dandy guides that talk you through okay, here are what you can have. This is the recreational permit, but this is what you can have. These species that are in red, you are not allowed to have. No white-tip sharks, no Caribbean sharp nose, no white shark. Sorry, you can't go catch a white shark. I apologize. But they run through this for both commercial and recreational fisheries. And they give you a lot of hints on how to identify these individuals. So very helpful to have. You can download them for free and have them on your phone. You can print them. They're available. All right. Now, in order to create that policy, we have to have research. Without research, policy is not the most helpful. So we have 3 ones that I'm going to talk about today. The first one is very local. UNC-IMS has the longest running shark research study in the US. It has been going officially since 1972, but Frank Schwartz actually started it in the 1960s, and he is the author of this book that I brought with me, which is Shark Skates and Rays of the Carolinas. It's a very great book if you are interested in it. We can pass that around too, because I can. Their study has seen a 50% decline since the 1970s. Again, the large or most common black nose and Atlantic sharp nose. Commercial and recreational fisheries have contributed to the decline, and the average shark studied is 3 feet long. 7,000 sharks. They're going off of Shackleford. They're doing one long line about a mile offshore and another long line about 12 miles offshore to gather this data. Now, this is generally kind of a population study, but they are also doing really applied research. So there are some current or recently graduated PhDs and master students who have been looking at tissue samples to get an understanding of the fish population health of what the shark is eating, and then also fecal samples, so taking a little poop sample and looking to see what they've been eating and the health that way as well. So kind of interesting. They also take blood samples. They do all sorts of things. It's better than making an animal regurgitate, which I had to do more than once to see what was in its stomach. Again, local, but with a little bit broader reach, we can talk about the North Carolina aquariums. They are part of a program called Spot a Shark that is focused on the sand tiger sharks. And hopefully this video plays. Maybe.
Spot a Shark USA is a citizen science program. What it does is it brings anybody who adventures on top of or under the water together to try to learn more about sand tiger sharks, which are an imperiled species of shark. This program helps us understand how sand tiger sharks are using areas of the coastal ocean for their home. And the reason that's important is because this particular type of shark, the sand tiger shark, with their super toothy, iconic grin, yet very docile nature, has been estimated to decrease in number by over 75% in the past several decades. The way Spot a Shark USA works is that divers, as well as others who are exploring the underwater environment, take photos of sand tiger sharks. And when they come back to land, they then upload that photo to the Spot a Shark USA website. Then the researchers will go through and we will map the actual spots that we see on that particular shark.
So they map those spots, and then they are able to put it into a database, and they can see what sharks are hanging out where, see if there are any associations of sharks hanging out with other sharks, making little shark friends, which I love that idea of, and learning more that way. They've also been doing shark tagging, so they'll tag sharks. But this is a process. Spot a Shark USA is broader than just the aquariums, and the aquarium is also part of a species survival plan for these animals. And then moving further, globally, the big one that gets mentioned a ton is OSearch. And OSearch, I also have a video for, is looking at telemetry tagging. So they put a tag on it so they can mark and see where that shark is going. Also sometimes turtles and other animals. But it is an open source project. They bring tons of scientists in to study these animals. Oh, we're gonna get an ad. I apologize.
I'd go with Sparkle. It cleans everyday messes, and it won't clean out your wallet.
Add to.
No! No!
Come in tonight for Longhorn's Grill Master favorites, like the
The
fire
best
grilled
laid
bone-in
plans, everyone. The
outlaw
best laid
ribeye.
plans. I'm seeing if Christine can do it.
The tender center cut flows filet,
All right.
or our slow-cooked baby back ribs. Longhorn steak.
It's lunchtime. It's really trying.
Steak.
Okay.
OSearch is a data-centric organization. It's an enterprise we built to help scientists collect previously unobtainable data in the ocean to help move the system toward abundance. What we're simply trying to do is learn what's never been learned before at a rate that's never been achieved. And the only way to do that is to enable big collaborative teams. That's why we have many different scientists from many different institutions, all with different disciplines, maximizing the leap forward in knowledge on every single animal we touch. And integrated into a STEM educational curriculum, it's about total inclusion at every level. Exploration in the now, science in the now, education in the now.
So they are doing a lot of really cool work. In 2021, their 40th expedition was off of the Carolina coast, and they were noticing that adult white sharks were coming into this area, and then females were going offshore, and the males were returning back up north. And they went, well, that's interesting. I wonder why that is. So they went out to try to figure this out. What they believe is happening is they are mating off of the Carolinas, and then the females are going offshore to allow gestation and be alone while they're pregnant, while the males go back up to eat more food, which is kind of interesting. So they've sort of mapped out the picture for the Western Atlantic white shark, and now they are focusing on Mediterranean and South African stories of what the white sharks are doing. Recently, Contender is a white shark that was just pinged off of North Carolina on June 7th, and it weighed 1,600 pounds, which, again, not a full-grown shark. They can get up to 4,000 pounds, but kind of that sub-adult shark hanging out. Still big, still a big shark. So with all of that, I've talked about research. I have talked about their plight. What can we do? I'm breaking these into two categories. One is support. Support organizations that are doing great work for these animals. If you have the time and the ability, volunteer with them. Most of them would love to have you. Share what you learned. If you learned something cool today, share it. Or I will highly recommend this book, Why Sharks Matter, by David Schiffman. I will put a plug that he and I went to the same graduate school, so I am a little bit biased, but he is a phenomenal writer. This book is so nice to read. It's great. And it tells the story of shark scientists in here as well. So really cool, highly recommend it. You can also follow him on social medias. Experience sharks in the wild. If you're interested, you want to go swim with sharks, do it. Go see them. Just make sure that you're going out with a reputable person who has the shark's best interest and your best interest at heart. And then if you're a fisherman, follow fishing regulations. Make sure you're only taking the fish that you're supposed to fish. And then my second category here is ocean health. I think about this in the sense of, if I am feeling a little run down or a little sad, and then I'm surrounded by other people who are feeling the same way, I just feel like that intensifies my feelings. If we have these animals that are in this rough environment, are having these stressors, but then we can make efforts to make their overall habitat better, that's going to help them recover a little bit faster. So eating sustainable seafood, eat local seafood, support local, do those things. Try to cut back on single-use plastics, use reusable water bottles, all of those things that you've heard a million times. Reduce, reuse, recycle, refuse, all of those things. And with that, this is from Tumblr and was sent to me by multiple of my coworkers. They know I love sharks. So I'm going to just say, at any given moment, there's a shark behind you. It might be 1,000 miles away, but there is a shark behind you. And this person followed up saying, and that shark is totally behind you. It's supporting you in whatever you do and wants you to succeed. So thank you so much for coming. I hope you have a fantastic day. Our next lecture in our Maritime Heritage series will be right here on July 17th with the Battle of Beaufort with Christine Bryn, who's in the back. All right, now I'm done. Any questions? Oh, so the question for anyone online was, what shark is that shark jaw? I don't know. It looks similar to a bull shark jaw, especially the dentition looks similar to that, but we're not 100% sure. There wasn't a tag on that one. Any other questions? Yes.
Terrific presentation, everybody. Thanks. You mentioned human consumption as meat.
Mhm.
I missed it. Did you mention that at all?
The question was about human consumption as meat. I briefly touched on it, but not very much. It is used somewhat for meat, and if you are like locally, people serve shark, and if you're getting it from a sustainable fishery, that's fine. It's a very fishy fish. It is not a white fish that is not fishy. It is not the biggest, like our commercial shark fishing is going after sharks for meat, but that commercial shark fishery is actually a smaller reason that they are overfished than the bycatch side of it. It's just not a big draw. They don't know why. And shark fin soup is the reason for the finning. And that has become more popular, but the rules behind it have changed to create kind of better methods for that. And shark fin soup, just the shark fin just adds some proteins that changes the texture of it. It doesn't change the taste. It's kind of interesting. But you can eat shark if you would like to. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just curious with the shark competition.
Oh, yeah. The shark, the recreational shark fishery tends to be more catch and release, but it is sometimes the stress of the catch leads to the demise of the shark at the end. Some recreational fishery is for food for consumption. And then the shark tournaments, my understanding with the shark tournament was that it was actually, they ended up going to research. The UNC came in to do the study on those sharks from the poor boy shark fishing tournament. Anything else? Yeah.
Is that an animal that can be trained?
Oh, the question is, can sharks be trained? That is a wonderful question. There is evidence in the zoo and aquarium setting of training for food. So target training these animals. At the aquarium I worked at in a previous life, we had our sharks target trained to come up to the tank and then we would hand feed them. I know that the Georgia Aquarium has their whale sharks target trained to follow after boats that dispense all of their food in there. And with rays, which are cousins to sharks, there is evidence of rays being somewhat trainable as well.
I'm just thinking about that.
Oh, yeah, if there's a way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's any work in that. In the 1960s, the government during the Cold War was afraid that sharks were going to ruin their underwater operations. So they tried to put a shark repellent out. It was not very successful. They tried. But I don't know. I know that the military has focused more on mammal use than sharks. Great question. Any other questions? Yeah.
So,
Mm-hmm. Well, the question is, are dogfish true sharks? They are true sharks. They're just in a different kind of category family of sharks. But they are a true shark. They are separated out in everything. I think just due to their sort of abundance and likely their size, but they get separated out for fisheries, and I'm not 100% sure as to why that is the case. Great question, though.
Why does this, are they called spinning sharks?
This
Why do they
spin. Oh, I am unsure why spinner sharks spin. I would love to know that answer, though. Smaller friends who are going to go to school and potentially college, if you can go figure that out for me, I would love it. I would love it so much. I do have maybe, nope, I can't click. Yes, yes, yes. I did just want to throw this up here in case anyone is interested. The North Carolina Aquariums have a Suds for Shark event this evening at Shortway Brewing in Newport. So if you're interested in attending that, I'm sure they would love to have you there. They're going to have a silent auction, I think, and trivia. So good options. Well, thank you guys so much. Definitely, if you want shark's teeth, please take shark's teeth. I do have a couple of their shark jaws and miscellaneous shark things up here if you want to see them. But I really appreciate you coming to listen to my talk today. Welcome.